Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, we take a look at the looming mental health crisis in the state. Also, the V team will weigh in on government efficiency. And Mike Hubbard's legal team swung for the fences, going, I was just a foul ball. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Brett, and the V Team with Claire Austin, Susan Britt, Jack Campbell, Baron Coleman, Charlana Spencer, and special reports with Jonathan Barbie. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to the Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V Team. Welcome all.
Welcome.
Good morning.
It has been a very busy week. One day they had up to 21 committee meetings, virtually meeting at the same time. It's been wild. But one of the things we've been hearing for the last 4 years, and we're hearing it again this year, is government efficiency. That's the buzzword. We have no-bid contracts under government efficiency. We have created the largest bureaucracy in law enforcement that Alabama's ever known under government efficiency. Is government efficiency a principle of conservative governance, Baron?
It is. I mean, government efficiency is a principle of conservative governance. I think if you had to distill it into one sentence, you'd probably say a conservative wants to collect no more taxes than is necessary to fund a scaled-down, bare-bones government. I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell. The question we have is, do we have enough money to even run a scaled-down, bare-bones budget? I don't know that we do. That's the question they have to answer.
I think one of the things, and I've had a problem with this notion of efficiency when you tackle it from the standpoint of saying we'll have no bid contracts because it's more efficient, or we'll have a large bureaucracy because it's efficient. I mean, those are terms we use in business. They aren't really terms we use in government.
I don't think the words efficient and state government will ever go together. but I'll also say these guys at the State House are either blind or deaf or both, because they must not be traveling on dilapidated roads. They must not be crossing unsafe bridges. They must not drive by rundown schools. They must not be on the highway and see no state troopers. I mean, because those are the things that are wrong, and scaling government down at a time like this is not the answer. The answer is finding the revenue to fund our programs.
Well, they're talking about cutting 99 troopers from the state highways. I mean, Susan, we only got about 400 and something now. I mean, what happens?
What are we going to end up with, 12? I mean, you and I travel a lot on Alabama's highways, and it's a dangerous place out there. Not, for motorists that are stranded, for people that are breaking speed limits and breaking the law. We need our troopers out there to protect us.
I mean, Baron, you've looked at this issue. I mean, where's it going?
Well, speaking about troopers, Maryland has about the same population we do. We have 400 troopers, up from just 290 6 months ago. Now they're going to cut 99 of those 400. Maryland has about the same population. They have over 1,200 troopers. I mean, we don't even compete in terms of the number of troopers per capita around the country. We're a larger state geographically than Maryland. It doesn't make sense. You can't scale down. At some point, you've got to say we've scaled down enough. Philosophically, there has to be a bottom at which government cannot operate below that bottom. There has to be that. Now, have we reached it? I don't know. I mean, I tend to think we probably have, or we're darn close.
I mean, Jack, do we wait for the bridges to collapse?
Yeah.
I don't
know how they get the message. They must fly over at 30,000 feet and just not see what's going on around them.
There is a road in Etowah County, Highway 77, that has been under construction for 30 years. They keep funding it and defunding it, funding it. Where's the balance here? Where is it?
It's the old fiddle while Rome burns. Let's worry about no-bid contracts and charter schools and all this other stuff to divert the public's attention from the real problem.
Well, and you know, it is definitely a problem. No one seems to want to face it. Another thing that, excuse me, came up this week that we reported on is GED, the test GEDs that allows kids that dropped out of school, late bloomers, folks to go back and get a high school equivalency certificate. The numbers in Alabama from 2013 to 2014 dropped by 90%, while the cost of obtaining a GED went up to $120. Jack, a lot of kids are dropouts, a lot of people that don't have a job
I don't believe a
can't handle it.
statistic that comes out of the Alabama Department of Education.
Okay.
If ever there was book cooking, it's done right down the street here.
Well,
under the great leadership of Dr. Tommy Bice.
Well, this seems to be a serious problem because you had 10,000 people take the test in 2013, 1,009 take it in 2014. They changed the test, Barron, put in Common Core and put it on computer only.
Yeah, I mean, at a time when they're trying to up the graduation percentage, they're trying to keep kids in school, they're trying to get more people qualified to go into the workforce. As you mentioned, 10,000 people passed the test in 2013, 1,000 passed the test in 2014. Why did a lot of these people did not grow up in the Common Core system. The Common Core system's only been in place, 3 or 4 years?
Right.
Yet they're switching testing to test you on those Common Core math principles and English principles rather than what the people who are taking the GED took 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago when they were in school.
And wouldn't you say statistically, a lot of the people that take the GED are your lower socioeconomic,
yes.
and you can take it online only? I bet a lot of them don't even have computers to be able to take it.
And understand that these are not just high school dropouts that are 17, 19 years old. These are people that have been, a lot of these people are people that have been in the workforce before, have lost their jobs and need to re-enter the workforce, and they can't do it without a GED. And this is a huge barrier for them because they're lower in the lower socioeconomic parts of our society.
And we were talking about this earlier. We got to get to it real quick. You know, states like Tennessee offer another type of equivalency test that's only $50, and you can take it online or you can take it on paper. And they say it's a lot easier. It's just what people need. I mean, you've heard about this.
Yeah,
test.
absolutely. And what it is, it's not the Common Core test.
Right.
It's an easier test for them to pass because it's the system they grew up in. When they were in high school 10 years ago, they learned math under the other standards.
And I want to stay on this subject, really. We were going to get to something else, but I want to stay on this because it's important. What happened in 2011, Pearson, the biggest testing organization in the world, partnered with GED, which is a part of the American Education Council, who has been administering the GED test for 70 years. Once they partnered with Pearson, they adopted Common Core, and they raised the price. To me, Susan, I think this is about money, not education.
It is. And another barrier, as we were talking about earlier, is if you fail this GED the first time, you get to pay $120 to take it again. Under the old system, it was a reduced rate. If you already paid the $50, then you failed the math, you paid like $10 to retake the math component. But now you have to take the entire test again. It costs, so you're talking about somebody who can't afford $120 to start with. Now we're talking $240.
Well, New York State, Jack, they offer the GED test free to everyone who wants to get it because they want people to finish high school.
Sure, but that ain't going to happen in Alabama.
Now, we just want to charge them more to get that degree,
Well,
right?
and again, there's a scandal somewhere. I'm not sure where it is.
Right, we haven't found it.
There's a scandal in here somewhere when you're more than doubling the cost of a test, when you're changing it to make it more difficult. Somebody in here is profiting. I don't know who. I can't point to them, but there's something going wrong here.
And am I wrong that they're also charging more for the preparation for the test? And there's a lot of
there's a lot of extra stuff you can get
like
now.
when you go into a concert and there's all the T-shirts and the posters
you
and
can get your GED test. But it's just there's a scam in there somewhere. We just haven't found it yet. We're going to hold it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back with health reporter Amy Hinton. Stay tuned.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We're joined today by APR's health reporter, Amy Hinton. Amy, welcome.
Thank you.
You have been looking in depth at the state's crisis that may occur if the mental health budget is cut. You sat in on the budget committee meetings.
Right.
Tell us what you've learned and what we're looking at.
This is a serious issue for the mental health department. I want to say that a lot of people, if you don't work in the mental health system, you don't have any reason to interact with it on a regular basis, it may be one of those things that you assume is there for you when you need it. That's increasingly not going to be the case. What I wanted to communicate through these stories was how increasingly fragile the mental health system is, and these cuts just underscore the fragile nature of the system. There is the mental health department under these proposed legislative budget cuts are facing anywhere from 70 to 99 $9 million worth of cuts. And that's just, quite frankly, an astonishing amount of money to cut from one of the most important health and human services agencies at the state level.
We have not only a moral responsibility, some might say, but we actually have a legal responsibility, don't we, to
That's
take
correct,
care of
yes.
these folks?
Yes, we do.
In the recent budget cuts, we're going to lose a lot of federal money.
Yes.
And tell us how that works, because like me, a lot of us just don't understand how mental health operations work at all on state or federal level.
Okay. The mental health department serves 3 target populations. They serve people with mental illness, they serve people with substance abuse disorders, and they serve people with intellectual or developmental disabilities. Most Americans are familiar with Down syndrome and autism, and that's what we call intellectual disabilities, or ID for short. The state draws down money since the deinstitutionalization movement in the 1970s and 80s. There have been a wave of closures, psychiatric hospitals, developmental centers for people with ID, and those services that used to be provided in institutions are now provided in the community. That was confirmed in 1999 by the Supreme Court in their Olmstead versus LC ruling, where it is now a constitutional right for these individuals to be served in the least restrictive settings. So the funding of community mental health programs for all of these populations are very important, because that is how states comply with this ruling. And Commissioner Jim Reddick, in his budget hearing, made a good point. He noted that the closure of these facilities in Alabama is a good thing. It's a positive step in the right direction.
The big facilities.
Yes, because as he kind of really eloquently put it, they are lawsuit magnets, and we can see that around the country. And in fact, in Alabama in 1971, the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Alabama, Judge Frank Johnson, this is the lawsuit that every law student in America studies, the Wyatt lawsuit, and it is the first lawsuit in America that really established a constitutional right to treatment for the service populations in mental health systems.
We've closed the big institutions. We have these community-based mental health services, but if there's no money, don't these community services close? And
Yes, they do.
Then what happens to the people?
Well, that's a huge problem. And on the mental illness side, it's important to understand that the mental illness population is on a spectrum. So you have a number of people, maybe 1 to 3% of that population, with serious mental illnesses, what we would know as schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. These folks need intensive services, and they also need crisis services. They need access to treatment and care when their medicines stop working or when they stop taking their medications. Under this proposed budget cut, 2,600 people in the mental illness side of the service population are going to lose access to crisis services. 16,000 people will lose access to mental health services in their community. That is a huge number, because what we've seen in the research is that those populations don't go away.
No.
They end up in prisons and jails. So it's not really a cost savings to cut these services, because the costs are just shifted onto the justice and public safety side of the ledger.
You obviously have studied this for a long time. You understand it clearly. We live in a state that constantly talks about the sanctity of life, about how every individual is important. How do our lawmakers, so you were there, our lawmakers looked at this budget. How do they make these cuts and still claim to hold the moral high ground?
That's a very good question. And, you know, I've gotten a lot of comment and feedback from the stories that I wrote about this. And quite interestingly to me, a lot of people were very shocked at the low attendance.
Right.
There were about 20 lawmakers that attended the budget hearing, and that really disappointed me.
Out of all of them there?
Out of all of them, there was about 20. The ones that were there, they asked very good questions, and I did notice that most of the attendees were the newly elected legislators, have not served before. There were a few folks in there that had been reelected, but for the most part, it was the new folks, which is good. But I think that most Alabamians would be surprised and disappointed to know that these budget hearings were so poorly attended. And I think that I tend to agree with the kind of assessment that you can tell a lot about a society by the way it treats the most vulnerable among that population. So this is an astonishing amount of money to cut, and I really worry about what's going to happen here because, again, these services are going to go away and they're not going to be available to people in their time of need. And I think most Alabamians expect there to be a safety net when they need it or a loved one needs it, and increasingly that's not the case.
And this applies across the board. And what happens to these people? They just, you said they'll end up in prison or in the jails.
Typically.
And all that. I mean, we've seen homeless people on the street. We've seen an increase in that. Is there any hope? Is there a solution that the mental health community can come up with to save this service?
Well, without the funding that's been that the department depends on to maintain the community-based system of care, the answer is no. As Commissioner Reddick very succinctly stated in the budget hearing, if we can't serve these individuals in the community, we can't serve them at all. And I think that's an important thing that needs to be underscored here. The other thing I would like to point out is that unlike a lot of the other agencies that are on the general fund side of the ledger, the mental health department in fiscal year 2015, they received about $44 million from the Education Trust Fund. When they were shifted over to the general fund side, those funds were zeroed out in the 2016 draft budget. So the mental health department, unlike a number of the other health and human services agencies, is kind of entering into this budget discussion already in a $44 million hole.
Wow. Well, I'm glad you're looking into it. It's an important issue. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
You're watching The V. Our guest has been APR health reporter Amy Hinton. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
The V is sponsored by Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
Welcome to Alabama's newest entertainment destination, Wind Creek, Wetumpka. The perfect escape for date night, a getaway with your friends, or a relaxing poolside cocktail. Whether it's a day trip to enjoy the best steak in Alabama or a romantic weekend, the finest Southern hospitality is just a short drive away. Wind Creek, Wetumpka. Find your winning moment.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. Last Monday, we learned more about the case against Mike Hubbard, motions filed by the defense and the prosecution. We were able to ascertain that at least 4 of the 7 people that are named as material witnesses in the Mike Hubbard indictment shared attorneys with Mike Hubbard. It is a complex matrix of attorney-client privilege that could spell some very bad news in the future. Susan, can you break down this complex cadre of attorneys that have been working with Mike?
Gladly. And as Barron likes to say, Mark White is the gift that just keeps on giving, because every time he files a motion and the state responds, we get more interesting information. If you look here at our graphic, you can see that Mike Hubbard essentially has 4 attorneys that he's involved with: Jim Pratt, Mark White, Rob Riley, and Bill Baxley. Now, early on during the Barry Moore trial, we discovered that Barry Moore and Sonny Reagan both shared Bill Baxley as an attorney. which leads back to Mike Hubbard. So any information coming out of the AG's office, any information coming out of the trial could flow through Bill Baxley and back to Mike Hubbard. If you look at Rob Riley, who's been his attorney since the 80s, he's also the attorney for Minda Riley Campbell, Bob Riley, of course, because that's his sister and his father, and Sonny Reagan. He also attended the grand jury with all three of these. So that it's definitely a way to pass information back through Rob Riley to Mike Hubbard. Mark White is the lead attorney for Mike Hubbard right now, also appeared to the grand jury with Will Brook. Jim Pratt appeared with Jimmy Rain. Now, since the indictments, Jimmy Rain and Will Brook have moved on to other attorneys, but the rest of them haven't. But if you see this is all the way for information to lead back to Mike Hubbard and his team through attorney-client privilege.
Baron, you're an attorney. Have you ever seen this outside of the mafia or drug lords?
Yeah, I was going to say, outside of a very complex drug or honestly organized crime case, you don't see this. And the point I would make is, and I'm not commenting on guilt or innocence here,
right.
You don't see innocent people often or ever do this. This is almost a red flag. I'm actually stunned more people in the media haven't picked up on this filing, this paragraph in particular, in the 55-page filing. One point I'll make is it would be illegal under the Grand Jury Secrecy Act in Alabama. We won't get into what all that means, but it's a sacrosanct act that makes the grand jury a secretive process. It would be illegal for Mike Hubbard or his attorneys to pick up the phone and call Bob Riley, Will Brook, Jimmy Rain, or Sonny Reagan and say, what did you testify about in front of the grand jury? That would be illegal. But they are allowed to leave the grand jury. Those four witnesses are allowed to leave the grand jury. Sonny Reagan can leave, Will Brook can leave, Jimmy Rain can leave. They can leave the grand jury and go tell their attorney everything that happened. And if that attorney is also preparing the defense of Mike Hubbard, you can see the problem that's created there. That's why it's employed by the mafia. That's why it's employed by drug cartels. These are very complex organizations with a lot of actors. And when grand juries get assembled, they end up going into grand jury and learning a lot about the prosecution's case. And they can go back and tell their attorney what happened, and their attorney can use that information to prepare the defense for his client.
If this is, as the prosecution seems to say, a planned strategy, this is diabolical, isn't it?
There's
Jack?
no question about it, and we always laugh and say they have thought of everything. I mean, this is Mike Hubbard here in the middle, and this is a web of attorneys that are working in the...
I mean, it's just outrageous. I mean, most
I
people...
don't know why some of these guys aren't disbarred.
Well,
if they knowingly represent people with conflicting interests in this case.
I mean, for Pete's sake, just in the Sonny Reagan thing, Sonny Reagan filed the complaint against Matt Hart on Bill Baxley's instruction and then turned around and called it in the Barrymore case 2 days later.
Yeah, so you have the attorney telling one client to file a complaint, and then once that complaint's filed, he turns around
And a
has
former
his
attorney
other...
general whose claim to fame was busting a speed trap in Fruithurst. I mean,
Well,
I'm sorry.
there just hasn't been a lot of Fruithurst speed traps.
I haven't seen one since.
Yeah, they're not around anymore.
I've never even seen
But, I mean,
Fruithurst.
this is, and we have a lot of fun with this, but this, Baron, as you have said, is the kind of thing that guilty people and people that have millions and millions of dollars at stakes and reputations at stakes do.
It is. I mean, ask yourself, I mean, Mike Hubbard obviously has continued to profess his innocence. He has every right to do so. He has a presumption of innocence until the day he goes to trial and is found guilty. Until that day, the law presumes he's innocent. Innocent people don't need to fish information out of the grand jury in order to prepare their defense because they haven't done anything wrong. Innocent people don't need to lock down, it seems like, every attorney in the state of Alabama and retain them. I mean, there's 4 right there. There's another 6 or 8 that we're aware of that he's got that show up on his legal pleadings. I mean, that's at 10 or 12 attorneys. Innocent?
And in addition to that, Bill Athenas is representing Rob Riley, who used to work with Van Davis, wasn't it?
No, he used to work with Matt Hart.
Matt Hart. And then who's the other one?
Lance Bell used to work with Van
Van
Davis.
Davis, that's what
But
it
one
is.
of the things, I mean, here Jack, you've got Rob Riley, who's representing Hubbard, his dad, and his sister, and he's represented, he has to have his own attorney. I mean, when do you have an attorney need an attorney?
And we wonder why Alabama's judicial system, which used to be hailed as great, is now considered a joke. We don't fund the courts, number one, and we have things like this going on. And among competent, able, smart lawyers.
And people keep asking, why doesn't the FBI look into this? What's different? This is nothing new in Alabama.
Why do people want the federal government? I mean, in Alabama, we never want the federal government to come in. And people go, well, I wish the feds would look at this. I wish the feds would look at this. We don't need the feds. We've got the right people doing it.
One of the problems is the 23 counts Mike Hubbard's been charged with. Now, maybe there were others, but those would not be federal crimes. Those are state crimes.
They're state crimes.
There is no federal statute that makes what he's done or alleged to have done a felony on the federal level. Those are state felonies.
And as you said, 23, we learned from the filing also that the grand jury's still impaneled.
Yeah, they are. And they're impaneled to look at if there are any further crimes. We've only got about a minute. If you and Baron, you and Susan take that minute and kind of sum up the motion hearings that we saw this week in the Hubbard case.
Well, I can do it in 15 seconds.
Okay.
Mike Hubbard said this was going to be big, fireworks everywhere. We're really going to expose the prosecution. It was a snoozer. Nothing much ado about nothing. It was the most boring day I could ever have imagined compared to how it was billed.
Absolutely. I mean, the most exciting thing was the Mike Ball fight with Matt Hart. But other than that, it was when the forensic guy got up and talked about the file, you know, the discovery. I mean, it was just.
Well, the thing about everybody made a big deal out of this Mike Ball thing. Matt Hart was calm, gentlemanly. He had his stuff together. I tell you, if you turn the volume down, Representative Ball reminded me of a petulant child in a grandpa suit throwing a temper tantrum.
And what qualified prosecutor doesn't try to scare people when they're questioning them? I mean, that's a tactic.
I have never seen a more disrespectful witness in a courtroom than I saw yesterday.
Well, it just was a disgrace, and you know, he needs to stick with his big old hat and his guitar playing and leave.
And he's a former ABI or
yeah, he was a corporal. I mean, leave it to the professionals, Mike. Stay off the radio and play your guitar somewhere in a honky tonk. Anyway, we're gonna have to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You can catch fresh stories every day at alreporter.com and catch us every Sunday on your ABC affiliate throughout the state. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next Sunday.
The Ballad of Lee County.
The Ballad of Lee County.
Down, 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 down.